The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder, and Aaliyah Davis pressed herself against the cold metal container, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She shouldn't be here. She should be home, safe in her tiny studio apartment, not hiding in the shadows of Seattle's industrial district, watching a man, that man, stand over a body with a gun in his hand. Im Jun-ki. The name whispered through her mind like a prayer and a curse all at once. Just 3 hours ago, she'd been laughing nervously across a table from him at a coffee shop, thinking he was a delivery driver her best friend had set her up with. A blind date. Something normal, something safe. But there was nothing normal about the way he moved now. Predatory, controlled, absolutely lethal. Nothing safe about the cold expression on his face as he gave orders in rapid Korean to the men surrounding him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and the sound might as well have been a nuclear explosion. Every head turned toward her hiding spot. Jun-ki's dark eyes found hers through the darkness, and in that moment, Aaliyah knew her life would never be the same. 3 days earlier, Aaliyah Davis had been absolutely certain that her life couldn't get any more pathetic. She stood behind the counter of Han's Kitchen, the small Korean restaurant in Seattle's International District, where she'd worked for the past 2 years, and watched the rain streak down the windows. It was the kind of relentless Seattle drizzle that made everything look grey and hopeless, which matched her mood perfectly. "Aaliyah, table 4 needs water." Mrs. Han's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and impatient as always. "Yes, ma'am." Aaliyah grabbed the pitcher and headed to the table, forcing her professional smile into place. The one that said she was happy to serve, grateful for the job, totally fine with the fact that she was 26 years old and barely making rent on tips. The lunch rush had been brutal. Her feet ached in the cheap shoes she couldn't afford to replace, and she'd already spilled kimchi jjigae on her uniform, the only uniform she owned because buying a second one meant choosing between that and groceries. But she smiled anyway, because that's what she did. Aaliyah Davis didn't complain. She didn't make waves. She worked hard, kept her head down, and tried not to think too much about the fact that her degree in literature from community college had led her exactly nowhere. "More banchan, please," one of the customers said without looking up from his phone. "Of course." She hurried back to the kitchen, refilled the small dishes of side dishes, and delivered them with another smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look tired," Mrs. Han observed in Korean, not bothering to hide her critical tone. She didn't know that Aaliyah had picked up enough of the language over 2 years to understand most conversations. "Maybe you work too slow. That's why you're tired." Aaliyah kept her expression neutral and continued cleaning. No point in defending herself. Mrs. Han would believe what she wanted to believe. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it during a rare quiet moment. "Keisha, girl, I found you a man. Blind date. Tomorrow night. Don't say no." Aaliyah nearly laughed out loud. A blind date. She barely had time to sleep, let alone date. Between working doubles at the restaurant and picking up catering shifts whenever she could, her social life consisted of Netflix and instant ramen. Aaliyah. "Keisha, I can't. I have work." "Keisha, you always have work. Live a little. He's perfect for you. Sweet guy, works hard, not some player. Coffee shop, 6 p.m. tomorrow. I already told him you'd be there." Aaliyah. "You didn't." "Keisha, I did. Wear something cute. Love you." Aaliyah stared at her phone in disbelief. Keisha had actually set up a date without asking her. She should be furious, but honestly, a tiny part of her was intrigued. When was the last time she'd done something just for herself? When was the last time she'd felt like anything other than a tired waitress in a stained uniform? "Aaliyah, stop playing on phone, customers waiting." She shoved her phone back in her pocket and returned to work, but the seed had been planted. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. 1 hour, 1 cup of coffee. What was the harm? The next evening, Aaliyah stood in front of her tiny bathroom mirror and tried to decide if she looked presentable or desperate. She'd chosen her favorite jeans, the ones that actually fit well, and a soft burgundy sweater that brought out the warm undertones in her deep brown skin. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, with a few curls framing her face. It would have to do. She grabbed her jacket and headed out into the Seattle evening, nerves fluttering in her stomach. The coffee shop Keisha had chosen was in Capitol Hill, a trendy neighborhood that always made Aaliyah feel slightly out of place. Everyone here seemed so effortlessly cool, so sure of themselves. The cafe was warm and crowded, filled with the scent of espresso and the murmur of conversation. Aaliyah scanned the room, looking for someone who might be waiting for a blind date, and then she saw him. He sat alone at a corner table, and Alia's first thought was that Keisha had seriously undersold this guy. He wasn't classically handsome in the traditional sense, but there was something about him that made it impossible to look away. Sharp jawline, dark hair styled perfectly, intense eyes that seemed to notice everything. He wore a simple black Henley that fit him like it had been tailored, and when he glanced up from his phone, those dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He stood smoothly, gracefully, and suddenly Alia felt underdressed and out of her league. Alia? His voice was deep with the slightest accent that made her name sound like something precious. Yes, hi. She forced herself to walk toward him with confidence she didn't feel. You must be Junki. He extended his hand, and when she took it, his grip was firm but gentle. Please sit. He pulled out her chair, actually pulled out her chair like they were in some kind of movie, and Alia found herself sitting across from the most attractive man she'd ever been this close to in real life. Thank you for coming, he said, settling back into his seat with the kind of easy confidence that suggested he was comfortable anywhere. I know blind dates can be awkward. Just a little, Alia admitted with a nervous laugh. Keisha didn't tell me much about you, just that you're a hard worker and, not a player. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something darker she couldn't quite read. Keisha is optimistic in her descriptions. She said you do delivery work? There was the briefest pause, so quick she almost missed it. I handle logistics for various businesses. Transportation, distribution, that kind of thing. It sounded vague, but Alia didn't press. First dates were about getting to know each other, not interrogating people about their job descriptions. What about you? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Keisha mentioned you work at a Korean restaurant? Han's Kitchen in the International District. I'm a server. She waited for the judgment, the subtle disappointment that usually crossed people's faces when they realized she wasn't some successful career woman. But Junki just nodded, his expression thoughtful. How long have you been there? 2 years. The pay isn't great, but Mrs. Han keeps me busy enough that I can make rent most months. Most months? She hadn't meant to say that. Alia felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Sometimes I pick up catering shifts to make ends meet. Seattle's expensive. It is, he agreed, and something in his tone made her think he understood more than she'd expected. Do you live alone? Studio apartment in Beacon Hill, nothing fancy, but it's mine. She paused. What about you? I have a place downtown. He said it casually, but downtown Seattle meant money. Real money. Alia felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle over her shoulders. Before she could spiral too far into self-consciousness, a barista appeared at their table. What can I get you folks? Americano, black, Junki said, then looked at Alia. And for you? Just a regular coffee, please, with cream. As the barista walked away, Junki's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and for just a second, his entire demeanor changed. The easy warmth vanished, replaced by something cold and razor-sharp. He typed a quick response, and when he looked back at Alia, the warmth had returned so smoothly, she wondered if she'd imagined the shift. Sorry about that. Work never really stops. I get it. Mrs. Han texts me at all hours, too. They talked for the next hour, and Alia found herself relaxing despite her initial nerves. Junki was easy to talk to, asking questions that seemed genuinely interested in her answers. He didn't talk much about himself. She noticed that. But when he did, there was an intensity to him that was magnetic. I should probably go, Alia said reluctantly when she noticed the time. I have an early shift tomorrow. Let me walk you to your car. I took the bus. Something crossed his face. Concern, maybe displeasure. Then let me give you a ride home. Oh, you don't have to? I insist. He stood, and there was a finality to the statement that wasn't quite a command, but wasn't really a request either. Alia found herself nodding. As they stepped out into the cool Seattle night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something much bigger than a simple ride home. Junki's car was not what Alia had expected. She'd been picturing maybe a Toyota, something practical for a delivery driver. What she hadn't expected was the sleek black Mercedes S-Class parked at the curb, looking like it cost more than she'd make in 5 years. This is yours? The question came out before she could stop it. Yes. He opened the passenger door for her, and Alia slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment's furniture combined. The interior smelled like expensive cologne and new car, and when Junki settled into the driver's seat, He moved with the kind of familiarity that said this wasn't borrowed or rented. "I thought you said you did delivery work." "I said logistics." He pulled smoothly into traffic, navigating the Seattle streets with easy confidence. The transportation business can be quite lucrative if you know the right people. There was something in the way he said it that made Aaliyah's instincts prickle. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where people didn't ask too many questions about where money came from, and she recognized the careful phrasing of someone who didn't want to explain their income source. But he'd been nothing but polite to her, and Keisha had vouched for him. Sort of. "How do you know Keisha?" Aaliyah asked, changing the subject. "Through a mutual friend. She mentioned you needed to get out more." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. "Said you work too much and don't take care of yourself. Keisha has opinions about everything. Is she wrong?" Aaliyah looked out the window at the passing city lights. "No, she's not wrong. But bills don't pay themselves, and I'm not exactly swimming in options." She felt his gaze on her, intense and assessing. "What would you do if money wasn't an issue?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. I used to want to write. I studied literature in community college, thought maybe I could work in publishing or write reviews or something creative, but that's not really practical, is it? Can't pay rent with poetry. Why not? Because the world doesn't work that way. Not for people like me. People like you." She turned to look at him, and in the glow of the dashboard lights, his profile was all sharp angles and intensity. People who didn't grow up with safety nets. People who can't afford to chase dreams because they're too busy trying to survive. Junki was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. "I understand more than you might think." Something in his tone made her believe him. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, and Aaliyah found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. There was something almost contradictory about him. The expensive car and clothes suggested wealth, but there was a hardness to him that spoke of someone who hadn't always had it easy. The way he carried himself was too controlled, too aware of his surroundings, like someone who'd learned to watch his back. "Turn left here," she said as they approached her neighborhood. "It's the building on the right, the one with the broken light." Junki pulled up to the curb and put the car in park, but he didn't immediately unlock the doors. Instead, he turned to face her fully. "I'd like to see you again." Aaliyah's heart did a stupid little flip. "You would?" "Yes." No hesitation, no playing it cool, just simple certainty. "Are you free Saturday evening?" "I work until 6. Dinner at 7 then. I know a place." She should say no. This man was clearly out of her league, and she had no idea what she was getting into. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw something beneath the expensive exterior, a loneliness that matched her own. "Okay, 7 works." His smile was small but genuine, and it transformed his face from merely attractive to absolutely devastating. "I'll pick you up here. You don't have to." "I want to." He reached across and opened her door, his arm brushing against hers in a way that sent electricity down her spine. "Get home safe, Aaliyah Davis." She climbed out of the car on legs that felt unsteady, then watched as he waited until she was safely inside the building before driving away. Aaliyah leaned against the wall of her apartment building's dingy hallway and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What had just happened? Had she really just agreed to another date with a man who drove a Mercedes and looked at her like she was the most interesting thing he'd seen in years? Her phone buzzed. "Keisha. Well, how was it? Did you like him?" Aaliyah. "He's different. We're going out again Saturday." Keisha. "OMG, yes. I told you he was perfect. What did I tell you?" Aaliyah. "You told me he was a delivery driver, Keisha. He drives a Mercedes." Keisha. "Okay, so maybe I simplified a little. But he's great, right? And hot. Don't lie. I know he's hot." Aaliyah couldn't help but smile as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Aaliyah. "Yeah, he's hot." The next few days passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Aaliyah found herself thinking about Junki at the strangest moments, while refilling water glasses, while cleaning tables, while lying in bed unable to sleep. Saturday arrived with typical Seattle rain, and Aaliyah spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out what to wear to dinner with a man who probably ate at restaurants where the servers made more than she did. She finally settled on a simple black dress she'd bought on clearance years ago, paired with the only nice shoes she owned. Her hair was twisted up in an elegant updo, and she'd borrowed Keisha's good earrings. It would have to do. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone buzzed. "Junki, I'm downstairs." Aaliyah grabbed her jacket and purse, took one last look in the mirror, and headed down. The Mercedes was parked at the curb, and when Junki saw her, he got out of the car. He wore all black, dress pants, a fitted shirt that hugged his frame perfectly, and a jacket that probably cost more than her rent. His hair was styled back, and when his eyes travelled over her, Aaliyah felt heat bloom in her cheeks. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and opened her door. "Thank you. You look—" She gestured vaguely at all of him. "Really good." That small smile appeared again as he closed her door and walked around to the driver's side. "Where are we going?" Aaliyah asked as he pulled into traffic. "A restaurant I think you'll enjoy, Korean fusion with a modern twist." They drove toward downtown, and Aaliyah watched the neighborhoods change from working class to affluent. When Jun-ki finally parked in front of a sleek building with subtle lighting and a doorman, her stomach dropped. "Jun-ki, this looks expensive." "Don't worry about it." He came around and offered his hand to help her out of the car. "Tonight is my treat." The restaurant was beautiful, all clean lines and soft lighting, with a view of the Seattle skyline that took her breath away. The host greeted Jun-ki by name and led them to a private table near the windows. "You must come here a lot," Aaliyah observed as they sat down, "occasionally for business." There was that word again, business. The vague, catch-all term that explained everything and nothing. A waiter appeared with menus and a wine list, and Aaliyah's eyes widened at the prices. She tried to find the cheapest thing on the menu, but Jun-ki noticed. "Order whatever you want," he said quietly. "Price isn't a concern." "That's easy for you to say." "Aaliyah." He waited until she looked at him. "I asked you here because I wanted to spend time with you. Let me do this." There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that cut through her defenses, so she nodded and ordered the dish that had sounded most interesting, not the cheapest one. As they ate, conversation flowed easily. Jun-ki asked about her work, her dreams, her life. He listened in a way that made her feel heard, really heard, for the first time in years. But when she asked about his work, his answers remained frustratingly vague. Transportation, logistics, business deals. Nothing concrete, nothing specific. "You're very private about your job," she finally said. His expression shifted, just for a moment, into something guarded. "My work can be complicated. It's better if we don't discuss it." "Why?" "Because I don't want it to touch you." The statement hung between them, loaded with implications Aaliyah didn't fully understand. Before she could press further, Jun-ki's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. "I need to take this, excuse me." He stepped away from the table, and through the window, Aaliyah could see him pacing as he spoke in rapid Korean, his body language tense and aggressive. Whatever the conversation was about, it clearly wasn't good. When he returned, the warmth had drained from his face. "I'm sorry, something's come up at work. I need to handle it." "Oh, of course." Aaliyah tried to hide her disappointment. "I'll take you home first." The drive back was quiet, tension radiating off Jun-ki in waves. When they reached her building, he turned to her with regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry our evening was cut short." "It's okay. Work happens." "Can I make it up to you tomorrow?" She should probably slow this down, give herself time to think, but instead she heard herself say, "Tomorrow works." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so unexpectedly intimate that it sent shivers through her. "Tomorrow, then." Aaliyah watched him drive away, and a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that she was getting in over her head. She ignored it. Sunday started like any other day off. Aaliyah slept in, did laundry, and tried not to think too much about the mysterious man who'd kissed her hand like something out of a romance novel. By the time evening rolled around, she was equal parts excited and anxious. Jun-ki had texted her address to a different restaurant, this one near the waterfront. When she arrived, he was already waiting outside, and the sight of him made her pulse quicken. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "Hi." He reached for her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come on, I want to show you something." Instead of going into the restaurant, he led her down the waterfront boardwalk. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the Olympic mountains loomed in the distance. "It's beautiful," Aaliyah breathed. "I thought you'd like it." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, hand in hand, and Aaliyah couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this content. "Tell me something about yourself that no one knows." The question surprised her. "Like what?" "Anything. Something real." She thought about it, then decided to be honest. "Sometimes I steal food from the restaurant. Just small things. Leftover banchan that Mrs. Han's going to throw away anyway, or rice that didn't get served. I tell myself it's fine because she wastes so much anyway, but I still feel guilty about it." Jun-ki stopped walking and turned to face her. "Why do you steal food, Aaliyah?" She looked away, embarrassed. Because some weeks I have to choose between groceries and electricity, and I'd rather eat stolen kimchi in the dark than go hungry. His hand tightened on hers. Does she pay you so little? She pays minimum wage. That's legal. It's just not livable. Aaliyah laughed, but it came out bitter. Welcome to America, right? Work full-time and still struggle to survive. You deserve better than that. Maybe. But deserving and getting are two different things. She looked up at him. Your turn. Tell me something real. Junki was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. I'm not a good man, Aaliyah. The work I do, the life I lead. There are things I've done that I can't take back. Everyone has regrets. Not like mine. He cupped her face with his free hand, and the gesture was so gentle, it made her chest ache. You should probably run from me, as far and as fast as you can. Then why are you here with me? Because I'm selfish. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be human instead of... He trailed off. Instead of what? He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss that was soft and searching and absolutely perfect. Aaliyah melted into him, her hands fisting in his jacket as he deepened the kiss. He tasted like coffee and something darker, something dangerous that she should probably be afraid of but wasn't. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Junki rested his forehead against hers. You're making this very difficult, he murmured. Making what difficult? Staying away from you. Then don't. The words came out before she could stop them, bold and reckless. His laugh was low and pained. If only it were that simple. They walked back to his car hand in hand, and when he drove her home this time, he walked her all the way to her apartment door. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. I work until 9. I'll pick you up from the restaurant. Aaliyah should have been worried about Mrs. and seeing her with someone, about the questions and gossip that would inevitably follow, but she just nodded and watched him disappear down the stairs. The next evening, Aaliyah's shift was particularly brutal. A large party had ordered half the menu, left a terrible mess and tipped exactly $3. She was wiping down their table, fuming silently, when Mrs. Hahn appeared. Aaliyah, you need to work faster. Table turn too slow. You lose money for restaurant. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hahn. I'm going as fast as I can. Not fast enough. Maybe you're not right for this job. The threat hung in the air, vague but unmistakable. Aaliyah bit her tongue and continued cleaning, her hands shaking slightly with suppressed frustration and fear. At 9 o'clock, she clocked out and stepped into the alley behind the restaurant where the staff entrance was. The Seattle night was cold and damp, and she pulled her jacket tighter around herself. The Mercedes was parked at the curb, impossible to miss in this neighborhood. Aaliyah slid into the passenger seat with a grateful sigh. Hi. Hard night? Junki asked, pulling her gently toward him for a kiss. Mrs. Han threatened to fire me. Again. His expression darkened. Why? Because that's what she does. Keeps us all scared so we'll work harder for the same terrible pay. Aaliyah closed her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm in a bad mood. We don't have to go out tonight if you don't want to. I have a better idea. Come to my place, I'll cook for you. You cook? I'm full of surprises. He pulled into traffic, heading toward downtown. Junki's apartment was in one of the glass towers overlooking Elliott Bay. The doorman greeted him by name, and the elevator required a key card for access to the penthouse level. Penthouse. Of course. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, Aaliyah's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire Seattle skyline, and the space was decorated in minimalist modern style, all clean lines, expensive furniture, and carefully curated art. This is where you live? She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Yes, make yourself comfortable. He shrugged off his jacket and headed toward the open kitchen. I'm going to make you real Korean food, not the tourist version Mrs. Han serves. Aaliyah sank onto the leather couch and watched him move around the kitchen with practiced ease. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms, and she found herself mesmerized by the simple domesticity of it all. Where did you learn to cook? She called out. My mother taught me before she died, said a man who couldn't feed himself was useless. There was old pain in his voice, carefully controlled. How old were you when she passed? 15. I'm sorry. He looked up from the cutting board, his expression unreadable. Life happens. We survive or we don't. There was a story there, a whole history of hardship that matched her own. But before Aaliyah could ask more, Junki's phone rang. His entire demeanor changed when he looked at the screen. "I need to take this." He disappeared into another room, and Alia could hear him speaking in rapid, angry Korean. The conversation went on for several minutes, and when he returned, his jaw was tight with tension. "Everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Business complication. Nothing for you to worry about." But his phone rang again almost immediately, and this time his expression was purely furious. He answered in Korean, and even though Alia couldn't understand most of it, she caught a few words. Numbers. A location. Something about a shipment. And then one phrase that made her blood run cold. "Get rid of the body." Alia's heart stuttered. She must have misheard. Must have misunderstood. But Jun-Ki's face was cold and hard in a way she'd never seen before. This was the face of someone capable of giving orders like that. He hung up and turned to find her staring at him. "Alia, I should go." She stood up quickly, grabbing her purse. "Wait." He moved toward her, but she stepped back. "What kind of business are you in, Jun-Ki, really?" His silence was answer enough. "Oh my God." Her voice came out as a whisper. "What are you?" "It's complicated." No, it's not complicated. Either you're a criminal or you're not, and I'm pretty sure I just heard you order someone to get rid of a body." Her hands were shaking now, and she couldn't tell if it was fear or anger or both. "Let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me this whole time? That I've been kissing a—" She couldn't even say it. "I never lied to you. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." She moved toward the elevator, but he stepped in front of her. "Alia, please, just listen." "Move." "Not until you hear me out." They stood there, deadlocked, and Alia could see the conflict warring in his eyes. Finally, he stepped aside. "I'll drive you home. I'll take an Uber." "It's not safe." "I don't care." The words burst out of her, louder than she'd intended. "You don't get to pretend you care about my safety when you're—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Just let me leave." He stood frozen as she called the elevator, and when the doors finally opened, he spoke quietly behind her. "I'm sorry." Alia didn't turn around. She stepped into the elevator and watched him disappear as the doors closed. Only when she was safely in the Uber, heading back to her tiny apartment, did she let herself cry. Alia called in sick to work the next day. She never called in sick, couldn't afford to, but she also couldn't face Mrs. Han's kitchen, couldn't serve Korean food and smile at customers, while her mind replayed that phone conversation over and over. Get rid of the body. She'd been so stupid. The expensive car, the penthouse, the vague answers about his work. All the red flags had been there, and she'd ignored them because he made her feel special, because he looked at her like she mattered. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop since last night. Texts from Jun-Ki that she couldn't bring herself to read. Voice messages she deleted without listening to. By the third day, Keisha showed up at her apartment with takeout and determination. "Okay, spill." What happened? Alia told her everything, the dates, the kiss, the conversation she'd overheard. When she finished, Keisha was quiet for a long moment. "Laya, I didn't know. The friend who introduced us, he just said Jun-Ki was successful in business. I swear I had no idea he was involved in anything illegal." "It's not your fault. I should have known better." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. I'm going to forget about him and move on with my life." Even as she said it, Alia knew it was a lie. You didn't just forget someone like him, Jun-Ki, but she had to try. She returned to work on Thursday, and Mrs. Han's disapproval was immediate and cutting. "You missed 3 days? No call. This is unacceptable." "I called in sick every day, Mrs. Han. I have the text to prove it." "Text's not good enough. You should call. Show respect." Alia bit back her response and tied on her apron. The lunch shift was mercifully quiet, giving her time to lose herself in the rhythm of work. She was refilling water glasses when the door chimed, and she looked up automatically to greet the new customer. Jun-Ki stood in the doorway, looking haggard in a way that made her chest ache despite everything. Their eyes met, and the air seemed to leave the room. "Alia," Mrs. Han barked, "take that table." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Mrs. Han she wouldn't serve him. But she needed this job, so she grabbed a menu and walked over on legs that felt like they might give out. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about." "Alia, please." His voice was low, urgent. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I'm working. Then I'll order food and wait until you're off shift. She should tell him to leave, should make a scene, get Mrs. Han to throw him out. But something in his expression stopped her. "Fine, what do you want to eat?" "I don't care, whatever you recommend." She scribbled down an order, japchae and bulgogi, items she knew the kitchen could make quickly, and retreated before she could do something stupid like start crying in front of him. The next 2 hours were torture. She could feel his eyes following her as she worked, and every time she glanced his direction, he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Finally, mercifully, her shift ended. She clocked out and found him waiting by the front door. "My car is outside," he said quietly. "I don't want to get in your car. Then we'll walk." They ended up at a small park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench overlooking Puget Sound. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "I'm not a good man," Junki finally said. "I told you that, but I need you to understand. What you overheard wasn't what you think. You told someone to get rid of a body, Junki. How is that not what I think? It was a mannequin. We used them for certain business operations, testing security systems, creating diversions. The one we'd used was damaged and needed to be disposed of." He turned to face her. "I'm not asking you to like what I do, but I'm not a murderer. What are you then?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "My organization handles goods that don't go through traditional channels. Import-export distribution. Some of it is legal, some of it isn't. But we have rules. No drugs, no trafficking, nothing that hurts innocent people. You're in the mafia. We prefer to call it a business organization. That's semantics. Maybe, but it's the truth." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. "My father built this organization from nothing. When he died, the responsibility fell to me. I was 19 years old and I had a choice. Take over or watch everything my family had built fall apart. Let people who depended on us lose their livelihoods. So you became a criminal. I became a leader. I protect my people. I make sure families have food on their tables. Is it conventional? No, but it's honest work in its own way." Aaliyah wanted to argue, wanted to hold on to her moral high ground, but she'd grown up in neighborhoods where people did what they had to do to survive, where the line between legal and illegal was often thinner than people wanted to admit. "Why me?" she asked instead. "Why pursue someone like me when you could have anyone?" His laugh was soft and pained. "Because you're real, Aaliyah. Because when I'm with you, I don't have to be Im Junki, leader of the organization. I can just be me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I'm just a waitress. You're not just anything." He turned her face toward him gently. "You're brilliant and strong and you see people, really see them. You looked at me and didn't see power or money or status. You just saw a man. When was the last time anyone did that?" Tears burned in Aaliyah's eyes. "I'm scared of this. Of you. I know. You should be. But I swear to you, I will never let my world touch you. You'll be safe. Always. You can't promise that. Watch me." He kissed her then, desperate and searching, and Aaliyah kissed him back, even though she knew she shouldn't. Knew this was probably a mistake, but her heart didn't care about logic or safety. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Junki rested his forehead against hers. "Give me a chance. Let me prove that this can work." Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to walk away while she still could, but instead she heard herself whisper, "Okay." The next few weeks were a strange, wonderful blur. Junki kept his promise. His business never intruded on their time together. They fell into a rhythm. Dinners after her shifts, walks along the waterfront, quiet evenings at his penthouse where he cooked for her, and they talked for hours. He never pressured her for more than she was ready to give, and slowly, Aaliyah felt her guard coming down. She learned that he spoke 4 languages, that he played piano, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. She learned that he was generous with his people, that he had a code of honor that might not align with the law but was unshakable nonetheless, and she learned that she was falling for him. Hard. One evening, as they sat on his couch watching the city lights, Junki's phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. "I need to handle something. Will you be okay here for an hour?" "Of course." He kissed her forehead and disappeared into his office. Aaliyah tried to focus on the book she'd brought, but curiosity got the better of her. She wandered around the apartment, looking at his art collection, his bookshelves, and then she noticed his office door was slightly ajar. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't, but her feet carried her forward anyway. Through the crack she could see Junki on the phone, his back to her. Behind him, his computer screen displayed what looked like a map with various markers. And then she heard it. An address. A familiar address. A restaurant. Han's Kitchen. Ice flooded her veins. Why would Junki have her restaurant marked on what looked like some kind of operational map? She must have made a sound because he turned, and his eyes widened when he saw her. Aaliyah! But she was already backing away, her heart hammering. "Why is my restaurant on your computer?" It's not what you think. Stop saying that. Just tell me the truth. He moved toward her, hands raised placatingly. Han's Kitchen is a front for a rival organization. They use it to launder money and coordinate their operations. The world tilted. What? Mrs. Han's son-in-law runs a competing organization. They've been using the restaurant as cover for years. No, that's impossible. It's just a restaurant. Is it? Have you ever wondered why she pays you so little? Why she keeps the staff scared and isolated? It's easier to hide illegal activity when your workers are too afraid to ask questions. Aaliyah's mind raced, connecting dots she'd never wanted to see. The strange deliveries that only Mrs. Han handled, the private meetings in the back office, the way certain customers were treated differently than others. Oh my God. I've been monitoring them for months. They're planning something big and I need to know what. Is that why you approached me? To get information? The pause before he answered told her everything. At first, yes. But Aaliyah, everything between us, it became real. I swear to you. She stumbled backward, feeling sick. You used me. No, I wanted to protect you. I still do. When their operation falls apart, and it will. I don't want you caught in the crossfire. Get away from me. Aaliyah, please. I said get away from me. She grabbed her things and ran for the elevator, ignoring his calls behind her. The doors couldn't close fast enough. Only when she was in an Uber heading back to her apartment did the full weight of betrayal crash over her. He'd used her. Everything. The dates, the kisses, the quiet moments had been a lie, a means to an end. And like a fool, she'd believed him. Aaliyah didn't go back to work. She couldn't. Every time she thought about walking into Han's Kitchen, knowing what she knew now, her stomach turned. But staying away meant no paycheck, and her savings were nearly gone. On the third day, her phone rang. Mrs. Han. You know, come to work again? You fired. Don't come back. The line went dead before Aaliyah could respond. She sat on her couch, staring at the wall, and wondered how her life had fallen apart so completely in such a short time. No job, no savings. And the one person who'd made her feel special had been lying to her from the start. Her phone buzzed with a text from Junki. Another one. She'd ignored dozens already. Junki, please, let me explain. Please be safe. They know I've been watching them. She deleted it without reading the rest. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound in her old building seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed threatening. She kept thinking about what Junki had said, that Mrs. Han's family was involved in organized crime, that something big was being planned. Around 2 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. They stopped at her door. Aaliyah held her breath, heart pounding. The doorknob rattled. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, when her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Don't scream. It's me. Open the door. She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Junki stood there, and even in the distorted fisheye view she could see blood on his shirt. Against every instinct telling her not to, she opened the door. He stumbled inside, and she saw the gash across his ribs, bleeding through his shirt. What happened? They made their move tonight, tried to take out my second in command. I got in the way. He leaned against her wall, breathing hard. I shouldn't have come here. I'm putting you at risk, but I needed to make sure you were safe. You're hurt. I'll survive. I always do. Aaliyah grabbed her first aid kit, the cheap one from the drugstore, and made him sit on her couch. Take off your shirt. He obeyed, and she tried not to react to the muscular torso now exposed, or the other scars that marked his skin. Evidence of a violent life. This needs stitches, she said, examining the wound. Can't go to a hospital. Of course not. She cleaned it as best she could, her hands steadier than she expected. You should have someone who actually knows what they're doing. Look at this. I have people, but I needed to see you first. His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. Aaliyah, you need to leave Seattle tonight. I'll give you money, help you start over somewhere safe. I'm not running. They know about you. Know that I... He stopped himself. Know that you what? Know that I care about you. That makes you a target. Then untarget me. Tell them I was just a means to an end. Tell them the truth, that you used me for information and then I meant nothing. I can't do that. Why not? Because it would be a lie. He stood up despite her protest, pulling her with him. Because the truth is I fell for you the first time I saw you walk into that coffee shop. Because approaching you might have started as strategy, but everything after that was real. Because I'm in love with you, Aaliyah Davis, and I don't know how to protect you from my world. The words hung between them, and Aaliyah felt tears streaming down her face. You can't love me. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you steal food from work because you're too proud to ask for help. I know you read poetry in your spare time because it reminds you that beauty exists even when life is hard. I know you have a scar on your left hand from when you were 10 and tried to cook dinner for your sick mother. I know you deserve so much better than what life has given you. How do you know about the scar? Because I notice everything about you. Because when I'm not with you, I'm thinking about you. Because you've become the most important thing in my world, and that terrifies me. Aaliyah looked up at him. This dangerous, beautiful man who'd lied to her and protected her and turned her world upside down. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. He cupped her face gently. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. She kissed him then, and he kissed her back like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aaliyah made her decision. What do we do now? Now I end this. His expression hardened. Mrs. Hahn's organization has been planning to move a major shipment tomorrow night. If I can intercept it, I can cripple their operation permanently. That sounds dangerous. It is, which is why you're not going to be anywhere near it. Junki, no. His voice was firm. I can face anything except losing you. Promise me you'll stay here. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone but me. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Okay, I promise. He kissed her once more, soft and sweet, then pulled his bloody shirt back on. I'll come back to you. I swear it. You better. She watched from her window as he disappeared into the night and sent up a prayer to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. The next day dragged by in agonizing slowness. Aaliyah paced her apartment, jumped at every sound, checked her phone obsessively. Nothing from Junki. By evening, she was climbing the walls. The news showed nothing unusual. No reports of violence or police activity. At 11 p.m., her phone finally rang. A number she didn't recognize. Hello? Aaliyah Davis. The voice was unfamiliar, speaking English with a heavy Korean accent. Who is this? A friend of Junki's. He asked me to call you. There's been a complication. He needs you to come to this address. Immediately. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. But what if Junki really was hurt? What if he needed her? She grabbed her jacket and headed out. The address was in the industrial district south of downtown. A maze of warehouses and shipping containers. Aaliyah's Uber driver looked nervous as he pulled up to the address. You sure you want to be dropped here, lady? Yeah, thanks. She climbed out and looked around. The warehouse ahead was dark, except for a light visible through a high window. This was stupid. This was dangerous. But her feet carried her forward anyway. The warehouse door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The space was cavernous and mostly empty, except for stacked shipping containers. And in the center, illuminated by a single hanging light, was Junki. He stood over a man on his knees, a gun in his hand, surrounded by other men in dark suits. His expression was cold and lethal, nothing like the gentle man who'd cooked her dinner. Aaliyah's phone buzzed in her pocket. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Every head turned toward where she stood in the shadows. Junki's eyes found hers, and for just a moment she saw absolute terror cross his face. Aaliyah, he breathed. Run! But it was too late. Two men were already moving toward her, and Aaliyah knew she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. Everything happened fast after that. The men grabbed her, pulling her into the light. Junki's gun swung toward them, his face transforming into something absolutely terrifying. Let her go. Now. Can't do that, boss. The man holding her left arm spoke calmly like this was routine. She's seen too much. You know the rules. She's not part of this. Junki's voice was deadly quiet. She's innocent. No one's innocent anymore, Junki. You taught us that. Time seemed to slow. Aaliyah watched Junki's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, saw him weighing her life against his position, his power, his empire, and then he lowered his gun. Let her go, and I'll step down. The organization goes to time in. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. The warehouse went absolutely silent. You'd give up everything? The man holding her asked, incredulous. For a woman you've known for a few weeks? Yes? No hesitation. Junki looked directly at Aaliyah, and she saw everything he felt written in his eyes. Without question. Junki, don't... Aaliyah started, but he cut her off. My whole life, I've done what was expected, what was necessary, but I'm done. She's worth more than all of this. The man on his knees, the one Junki had been interrogating, laughed bitterly. You're a fool. Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool in love than a king alone. The men holding Aaliyah looked at each other, clearly uncertain. Finally, the one on her left spoke. "Boss, we've followed you for years. You've never led us wrong. If you say she's worth walking away for, then we believe you." He released her arm, and the other man did the same. Aaliyah stumbled forward, and Junki caught her, pulling her against him protectively. "But the organization?" someone asked. "Taemin is ready. He's been ready for years." Junki looked around at his men. "I'm done with this life. I want something different. Something real." He looked down at Aaliyah. "If you'll have me." She should say no, should run as far from this world as possible. But instead, she reached up and pulled him down for a kiss. When they broke apart, she whispered, "I must be crazy." "Probably," he agreed, a smile finally breaking through. "Is that a yes?" "Yeah, it's a yes." The man Junki had been interrogating turned out to be Mrs. Han's son-in-law. He'd been planning to kill Junki and take over both organizations. The evidence Junki had gathered was enough to shut down their operation permanently and to hand over to the police anonymously. Junki kept his word. He stepped down, passing leadership to his second-in-command, and walked away from the only life he'd known. It wasn't easy. There were people who weren't happy about his decision, but true to his word, he protected Aaliyah through all of it. 3 months later, they left Seattle together. The coastal town in Oregon was nothing like Seattle. Smaller, quieter. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors, and the biggest drama was whose dog dug up whose garden. Aaliyah stood on the porch of their small house, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold. Behind her, she could hear Junki moving around in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "Food's almost ready," he called out. She smiled and went inside, wrapping her arms around him from behind as he stirred something that smelled amazing. "I got a job offer today," she said against his back. "The local bookstore wants someone to manage their events and book club. That's perfect for you." He turned in her arms to face her. "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. It doesn't pay much, but money isn't everything." He kissed her forehead. "I should know." They'd sold his penthouse, liquidated his legitimate investments, and started over with enough to be comfortable but not ostentatious. Junki now worked as a consultant for import-export companies, legitimate ones, using his knowledge of logistics without the criminal element. It was simpler, quieter, and infinitely better than the life they'd left behind. "Do you miss it?" Aaliyah asked, not for the first time. "The power, the excitement?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I wake up next to you, and I remember what really matters." She stood on her toes to kiss him. "I love you. I love you too." He pulled her closer. "Though I still can't believe you thought I was a delivery driver." Aaliyah laughed. "In my defense, you were very vague about your job." "Fair point." His expression turned serious. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this? Choosing me?" She looked around their modest home, at the books stacked on every surface, at the photos they'd started taking together, at the life they were building. "Not for a second," she said. "You're mine, Im Junki, and I'm never letting you go." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that was only for her. "Promise?" "Promise." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. And for the first time in both their lives, the future looked bright.